Kia ora and welcome to AP502 Post Pro Tools Introductory Worksheet 1. This is the video version of the worksheet that you can find on Moodle and in the class slides files. I think we introduced it in week 1 or week 2. So if you want to grab the PDF of that and follow along, that's fine. Or otherwise you're welcome to just use this. It should contain all the same information. It starts off with a little bit of an explanation about keyboard functions, and it's mostly about modifier keys such as Shift, Command, Option, and Control, and the symbols that are used for them throughout the text. It's worthwhile thinking about if you are on a Mac versus a PC. You may find there's some slight differences in the order of keys, so it's actually a bit annoying when once you get muscle memory of keyboard shortcuts using one or the other. So the Command key on a Mac is right next to the spacebar. Of course, that's the Alt key on a PC, which is the equivalent of the Option key, which is on the Mac keyboard, next to the Command. And then we've got Control at the end of the keyboard for both. The difference, I guess, is whenever I say, for example, copy and paste Command C and Command V on a Mac is Control C and Control V on a PC. So you have to sort of use a different finger to do that. Shift is, thankfully in the same place. Tab is actually in the same place. I'm not sure why they show it there. On both sides of the keyboard, we have the same function keys. And one thing to note on a PC, the Enter key here is actually called Return on a Mac keyboard. So we use these for two different functions. If you hit Return or Enter on the alphanumeric keypad, it will return your session back to the starting point. So it moves the cursor right back to 0, 0. If you use Enter on the numeric keypad on either a Mac or a PC, it's going to create a memory location. So that's a hotkey that's set up. I guess another thing that's important is on a Mac, it's a Command spacebar for record or just spacebar for playback. On a PC, it's Control spacebar. I always use 3 on the numeric keypad just by itself because it always works regardless of the operating system setup. So let's get into it. So that's the differences between a Mac and a PC. So just bear in mind if you're following along with this on a PC, I'm going to say things like Command or Shift Command O, and for it to work for you, it's going to have to be Shift Control O. So the Command key becomes the Control key on a PC. If I say Control something, it's the Start menu key on a PC. If I say Option, it's Alt, and Shift, of course, is Shift. So as it says in the worksheet here, you're going to log into a workstation. This is the idea that you're based in the lab. The first thing I wanted you to do is go to your Documents folder and create a folder with your name on it. This is because we're in a lab. So I'm just going to do that now. You can open a Finder window. The easiest way to do that is to click on the hard drive, or you can use in the dock, you can click on the Finder face. And I'm going to go to Documents, and I'm going to create a new folder. Action, new folder. Yep, or you can actually just go to any open window, Shift Command N, creates a new folder. Now you can see this, by the way, new folder, Shift Command N. If you're new to Macs, it's a good way to get around and find hotkeys that you can do things with, so you don't have to click with a mouse. So I'm going to put my name on this one. It doesn't have to be your full legal name or anything like that. It's just something that you're going to recognize. I might even just call it my initials, DT. So I've made my folder now, and this is where I want to save my session. So it means I can go back there. It's a local folder, but if I'm working on the same machine, I can go back and it gives me a folder to copy onto any USB drive I might have attached when I've finished working for the day. If I click on the Pro Tools icon, or if I go to the Applications and scroll down to Pro Tools, I can open up from there. Either way works. And the first thing that should pop up is your dashboard window. If it doesn't, you can go up to File, New, and create a new session. If it already seems to think there's a session open, you can use Command equals to show the mix or edit window, even when they're closed. It's worth trying that out just in case you've saved a session with the windows closed. As it says here, we're going to open up that, and in the dashboard, we're going to create a new session from scratch. So there's a bit of a talk through all of the things you can do. You can go to the recent tabs and open up any recent sessions you might have used. You can access your cloud projects by signing into your Avid account. And there's a couple of things here in the Get Started and in-app tutorials which are quite useful. So these are things like if you want to find out about certain aspects of Pro Tools, getting started with Pro Tools gives you a quick rundown. The in-app tutorials sort of focus in on a few things. And obviously you can make a new session, including a new session from templates if you want. So I could go and make a Dolby Atmos session if I was getting into that, or maybe look at post-production templates, stereo post-production mix. Yep, bit of a template there. We're actually not going to use a template today, but I do suggest that you have a look around and go through it. We're going to create a new session and we're going to call it AP502, your name. So AP502 underscore, I'm just going to say DT for my name again, underscore toast, and this is because we've got some files that we're going to use, underscore, and then it's the date. I'm actually doing this on the 4th of March 2025, so that's the international date code for that. For now, just follow through. We want to use WAV files, which it's already set to, not AAF. We want to go 24-bit, so 32-bit floating point will just create much bigger files, higher resolution. 48 kilohertz, the sample rate, so there's a few choices there. We're going to go 48K because that's the industry standard for video. And I'm going to change my I/O settings to stereo mix. This is so that Pro Tools defaults the input-output settings. And it's always a good idea to make sure this interleaved file is ticked. I'm going to choose prompt for location, but you can see here what I usually have at my studio is I've got a folder called Black Door Recording that I always set sessions up in so I know where they go. But in this case, I'm going to prompt for location so that I put it in the right, in a different place, and that's what you'll do in the video. So I'm going to create that session, make sure I'm in Documents, and remember I made a folder called DT. So I'm going to go into there. I always like list view. I don't know if other people do, but so as soon as I hit save, we can see now I've got the session file in there ready to go. And if I open that up, I've got my Pro Tools session empty and ready for me to go. I'm just going to hide Pro Tools Studio and we'll have a look at the session folder that's been created there. You usually get the choice, you can point them in a different direction if you like. When we make clip groups, when we use video files, and then the session file backups is around about every 5 minutes, I think is the default. Pro Tools saves a copy of the .ptx file just in case your computer crashes or you make a really big mistake and it's easier just to go back 5 minutes in time, or even 20 minutes in time, however much you want. It just keeps recording these sessions, and they're a real lifesaver sometimes. The wave cache is it's a file that is sort of the pictures of the sound waves. So whenever you record in, there's a graphical representation of the sound wave that you see. That's stored in the wave cache file, and it means that Pro Tools can open a little bit quicker because it doesn't have to redraw the waveforms that stored them. You can, however, delete that wave cache file and have it rebuild. And it usually takes, I don't know, 5 to 10 seconds depending on how big your session is. Like a really huge session might take a minute because it has to redraw everything, analyze and redraw. So all of these elements are in the session folder. If you always want to know where your files and your media are, always move this whole folder. Don't move this PTX file out of this folder. Not until you know exactly what you're doing, because it's a little bit tricky. And I do suggest in the worksheet that you try and experiment just to see what's going on. So let's have a look at that now. If I'm going to close Pro Tools, and to do that I'm going to go up to File and say Close Session. That's the best way to close a session and leave the Pro Tools program running in the background. So if you're swapping between sessions, it's just quicker because you don't have to quit Pro Tools and reopen it. I'm going to take a copy of this. I'm going to hold the Option key on a Mac and I'm going to drag across onto the desktop. Now I've made a copy of that session. Look what happens when I open that session up. Yeah, it works perfectly good. I'm just going to hide the Pro Tools session and notice what's happened to the desktop. We've got a session file backups folder, we've got audio files, we've got bounced files, clip groups, video files, the wave cache. These have all been recreated around this .ptx file, so that if I was to record now, it would be stored into this audio files folder. And if there was another audio files folder in here because I'd recorded on this session, they wouldn't be the same plate. It's always good to have two folders, two copies of it, because if you run into problems, it's always good to have a backup. And as I say there, if it isn't backed up, it doesn't exist, because you're only one mistake away from it not existing. So you want to be two mistakes away from it. So I'm going to open up this session again. Enough about file management. I've got my empty session. I'm going to do another video about all of the things that we're looking at in the edit window. Let's just pull that back there. I do talk about command equals to go between the two windows, and also that if I close the windows in a PC or Windows style workflow, Pro Tools is actually still open. That session is in fact still open. If I reopen the mix window, it's right back there, and you can see that's the session. It hasn't closed. So get out of the habit of clicking those red dots to close down a session. Always go File, Close Session, or just learn that key command, Shift Command W, or Shift Control W on a PC. Or quit Pro Tools when you finish by just going up and quit Pro Tools Studio, Command Q. That works for all Mac programs, by the way. So here we are looking at this. The very next page is about crucial settings for playback. So this is about getting sound out. So I'm just going to say go set up playback engine. This is one where the setup menu is sort of the big global settings. So I'm just going to go to the playback engine, and what that is basically the playback engine itself is the interface that you're using. So if you're in the studio, you might be using the Galaxy 32 or a Universal Audio Thunderbolt in Studio B and D and C and E. If you're in a lab using the teacher station, you might use a Thunderbolt, a Focusrite Scarlett. If you're in Bahutakawa, it's the Tascam US 20X20. So there's all sorts of things, and this is how you choose which interface connected to the computer that you're going to use. If you're in the labs, a lot of the time you'll use Mac Studio speakers or Mac iMac speakers or whatever they call it, Mac built-in speakers, and you might, when you plug your headphones physically into the computer, be given the option of external headphones. You can see here I've got no external headphone output. I actually have headphones on my interface, so it doesn't matter, but if you're using the inbuilt sound card on a computer as your interface, you may find, especially with Macs, that if you don't have your headphones plugged in, it's not an option. And if you plug your headphones in, suddenly you can choose it and then headphones work. Be careful about unplugging your headphones in that case, because what the Mac operating system does is if you don't have headphones plugged in, it makes the socket disappear as far as the computer's concerned. So you can imagine if you're in the middle of doing something in Pro Tools and you unplug your headphones, suddenly the interface is gone. Pro Tools goes, hey, I can't communicate with the playback engine, and usually it gives you the option to save and quit, and that's about all it can do, because you have to reopen and choose a new playback engine. So just take care with that. Below that is the hardware buffer size. This is all about latency. So if I'm recording, I keep this as low as I can with the computer still handling all the processing. And then when I'm mixing, I go higher. It just gives a little bit of time for the computer to start pre-calculating things so that its real-time processes can happen at the right time. So yeah, look out for that. This is also where you can enable your video engine. And I should probably do that now because I will be using it soon. The other things here, the optimizations, these will be different on every computer, but a lot of them are pretty straightforward. Ignore errors during playback is kind of emergency use only, because it can cause clicks and pops. It's for running a session that's too big for your system. Dynamic plugin processing, have that turned on, because it means if a plugin isn't passing audio, the computer uses the CPU processing on something else. Optimize performance at low buffer settings. I found that's a bit buggy. I think, yeah, I usually leave it off. It seems to work better. And limiting the number of real-time threads reduces, it basically allocates some amount of CPU percentage to Pro Tools only and takes it away from the operating system. My advice is use it if you have to. If you're constantly running out of processing power, you might need these things. My studio computer is pretty stonking, so I haven't found I need to use any of those things. The disk playback, it looks at how much RAM you've got in your computer. I've got 64 gig of RAM in this, so it's showing me the option of allocating 60 gigabytes of RAM to Pro Tools and 4 gigs to the operating system. That would be kind of crazy because the operating system is running the computer. So my general advice is to use normal, because then it's dynamic. It looks at how much RAM is available and just uses that amount. If the more RAM you have, the better. Yeah, so you just got to be careful about that one. Now it's going to launch the video engine. Cool. So something else you might want to look at is the I/O settings under the setup window. So this is basically how you can point Pro Tools in a direction in terms of sound. So how do I hear things? It's got labels for input and output. So it's a way of labeling like making custom labels for the inputs and outputs on your system. And also it looks at the interface and you can say, oh, okay, this label here, I want it to come into a certain analog path that's available on my interface, or an optical path, or another digital path. It's all based around what your hardware actually is. Same with the output. I can name the outputs in the software and then point them towards some physical outputs. There's a step in between that though, where I can take the output labels and then choose to send them to another output. So I might want to temporarily route something. For example, if I've got my main 1 and 2 output, or let's say Q3 and 4, and I want to send it to a separate thing to go to a headphone amplifier, I might tell it to go to A16, 7 and 8 output, which is the interface connection that's connected to the headphone amp. So it's a little bit complicated to begin with, but you get it does become simpler when you start using it a bit more. It's just a matter of, I always think of these as the labels that come up in the software. So they're the virtual patching, and this one controls the output of the virtual patch into the hardware patch. And if everything goes to custard, you can usually default, or you can actually import settings if you've got them saved. So if I went to my import settings, there's my studio settings with the correct labels and the correct patching all sorted out. So I can fix that up at any time. As problems arise, we'll look at what the solutions are. They're usually fairly simple. So those are things about getting sound out. So there's a couple of go-to places. If it just works, you might not need to interact with those things at all. The worksheet down the bottom then does suggest that we connect up a click track. So the way to do that is go track and right down the bottom, create click track. Boom, done. Now we've got a metronome. But for now, mostly when you're recording, it's just for doing, keeping musicians in time. And the other thing that it's useful for is a really quick way to set up and see if you're getting signal where you're expecting it to go. Good, that click track's working. If you're doing this at home and you can't find it, this is where you might go and check your playback engine. This is where, if you're in the lab, you might want to close Pro Tools, plug your headphones in, open Pro Tools and choose external headphones as the input setting. But hopefully by now you are hearing signal. So I'm just going to right click on there and delete, and that will be page 3. Page 4 of the worksheet was going through the menu structure and looking for a series of different key commands, things such as restore last selection, which is under the edit menu there. The setup, we've been through the I/O settings, how we change quick punches under the options, so that's there, it's actually on, I'll turn it off. Big counter, that's a window. Yep, so just going through, and if you use your list, that little table, and fill it out, it just gives you a bit of a tour around Pro Tools, and you can find that and find out what the hotkeys are for it as well. Do feel free to try those. So now we get to the real meat of the worksheet, which is importing video. We went through this in class, so quite a few of you might want to skip over it. But if in case there was any issue you had, I'm just going to go over it again. So first of all, I'm going to go and download the worksheet media files from Moodle. I just have to go to this. Alright, so we'll cut to this. Here we are on Post. Close this top part, and under Class Slides Files you can find the Worksheet Media zip. So I'm just going to download the Worksheet Media as well. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hide Pro Tools. And I'm just going to navigate to my Downloads folder. So I've got my Worksheet Media. I'm just going to I've unzipped it. So here's my folder, which is downloaded, and it's got a bunch of audio files and the Toast Studio clip. Fairly important stuff there. So you might remember from class, what I want to do is open up my folder that's in the Documents folder. This is my Session folder, and I'm going to put the video clip into the Video Files folder. In fact, I'm going to copy it in, so I'm going to hold Option and copy it in. Option, drag, Video Files. It's made a copy of it. Why I want to put it in the Video Files folder first harks back to what I said earlier on. When I'm moving this session around, I want to move this whole folder, and that's now going to include the Video Files folder. So if we look through the worksheet itself, it says copy the file straight into your Session folder, Video Files folder. Good. So once I've put this file into the Video Files folder, I can now import it into Pro Tools. And that's just as simple as going File, Import, Video. You could learn that hotkey if you're doing video a lot. Option, Shift, Command, I. Works like a charm. So I want to navigate to my Video Files folder, and forever now Pro Tools will go, this is where the Toast Studio clip is housed. You can import audio from the file. In fact, if you're doing it for your project, it's a good idea, because it'll give you the original file, might give you some cues and make it a little bit easier. Because in real life you'd be getting the production cut with the production sound, so there would be things to link up to. I'm not going to import the audio from this file because I know I've already replaced it. Now there it is, my Toast Studio clip. It's automatically figuring out that it's 29.97 frames per second. I think we've talked about that in class. If not, we will. And because I set up my playback engine earlier, I should just be able to open the video. So here's the video file folder. You can right click to resize. So I'm going to go half size. Maybe I'll even go quarter size because I don't need it to be that big. Just want it to be ticking away, so when I press play, yep, so you can see there's video happening. There's no audio yet, but that's going to be the next part. So the next section is all about creating or different ways to import audio. So I showed you a few ways in class, but I'm just going to go through what it says in the worksheet. So Shift Command N, this creates a new track dialog. So Shift Command N is the key command, but you could go to the track menu and hit new, and it tells you Shift Command N. This here I can change the number of tracks I'm creating. I can change whether they're mono, stereo, or various surround formats, depending on what I'm working on. I just want an audio track, but it does give me the option of different types of tracks, and we'll talk about that in another class. Samples versus ticks is absolute time versus musical time, tempo. So because I'm using audio, I want to use samples. And in terms of names, I'm actually going to name this DX, which is the shorthand version of dialogue, and I'm going to create 4 tracks because I know there's 4 dialogue tracks coming in for this film clip. So if I have 4 dialogue tracks, it'll name them dialogue 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then I can go through and rename them as I need to. I'm also going to create a stereo master fader while I'm at it. So 1 stereo master fader coming up. A lot of other DAWs automatically have stereo master faders, but because Pro Tools does so many different types of outputs, it doesn't default to one because it'll just end up half the time being the wrong one. So it's easier if you just choose what you want as you go, which I kind of like. So 1 stereo master fader. So it's created those 4 tracks and the master fader. So we're all ready to bring in some audio. I've sequentially name them DX1 to 4 as it says in the track there. There's a few ways to do everything in Pro Tools. I'm going to go up, File, Import, and this time instead of video I'm going to import audio. And 1, 2, 3, 4. Toast, Boris, Danny, Clem, Fandango. This is the import audio dialog box. It's kind of the old school way of doing things, but it still works pretty well. You can, of course, just drag things into the audio files straight into the session. You've just got to be careful with that, and this is the reason why. So currently I've selected these DX files. If I click Add, it will leave them in the Downloads folder, in this Worksheet Media folder, and Pro Tools will access them, play them quite happily. But just like with the video file, if I move to a different machine or move to a different location, it's not going to bring those files with me unless I'm careful about how I collect them in. So I would say always use copy, and what that will do is copy these files from wherever you have accessed them into your session audio files folder. So I'm just going to go copy all and open. This destination folder that it comes up with is automatically this session audio files folder. Now it gives me some options. Do I want them as a new track? I've already made the tracks, so I'm going to put them in the clip list. There they are. So the clip list is kind of like a place where your media can be stored in the program, but it's not actively being played back because it's not on the timeline. And it's a simple matter of just dragging and dropping. So I can put this dialogue in here. I've got toast, and if you go up to view, if you can't see the names, clip, show name, we've got DX2 Boris. I can go next. Danny, which is one of the engineers. DX4 Clem Fandango.
Yes, I can hear you, Clem Fandango.
So like the traditional delivery, Stephen, where you hit the word mind and the word gap.
Yes, thanks for clearing that up, Clem.
All part of the service, Stephen.
Cool. So I've got the audio in there now. And this has obviously been placed in and separated into the individual parts. This would be like if I was getting the dialogue from a studio that had been recording, the different actors doing ADR, or maybe some of it would be coming from the production, so from the location sound, and it's just being imported in, and I'm just bringing it in. So that's one of the ways you can use the import dialogue. You can also drag things in. So I could have, in fact, if I go back to the Finder, I could have just grabbed those DX files and just dragged them into Pro Tools. If I dragged them by themselves, if I just picked one up, like Machine Noise, and just dragged it in, it would create a new track, or it would go straight into the clip list if I wanted to, but it would be adding. So it's the same as if I was just leaving it in this location, adding it to the session, unless it's a different file format, in which case it has to convert it. So your best practice is to use the Option key or the Alt key on a PC, and so you hit Option first and then drag it in. So I'm just going to grab the music file, for example, and I'm going to drag that into the track list or down onto the empty space here, and it's going to create a new track, as well as import the audio and save it to the audio files folder. I will use this track menu mostly because if I come down here, wherever I put my mouse is where it's actually going to put the audio. If I go up here, it's going to put the audio at the start of the session. So if I just hold down Option, then pick up the file, drag it into here, and it's done a music file. Now I can just grab the name of anything to move it around, up and down. Yeah, cool. So now I've got a little bit of music.
Mind the gap.
As we've seen, Option dragging in to make a track, Option dragging into the clip list to make a file, Option dragging onto the empty space to place things and create a track. All of these ways are perfectly acceptable ways to do it, as well as going Shift-Command-I or importing audio, which does tell you a couple of things. So if I select something, it tells me what the parameters of that track is, and it tells me if it can be added into the selection, into this current session, or whether I need to do sample rate conversion. I can also play. So if I play this, I can audition the track. This one doesn't start for a while because there's a bit of silence to begin with. So none of these are going to make much difference. So I can import them that way. There's one other thing it talks about in the worksheet, which I think it carries on within Worksheet 2, which is the workspace browser. So there's a bit of detail on importing audio, and then it goes into using the workspace browser. So if you go to Window, New Workspace, Default, this is a sort of good way to search around in Pro Tools. So what it does, it's got a couple of advantages. It always has a folder or a direct link to the folder that you're working on, so we can see what's in the current audio files folder. You can see I copied that music one in, and we copied the DX. I can look at the video files folder. These are all within the session, so that's quite good. If I'm moving things from other places, I can just drag it into here. I can set up sound libraries, and you can see on this machine I've got a bunch of drums already in a sound library ready to go. Track presets, I've probably got some track presets I've set up. Probably skip that. That's, if you've got track presets and you want to drag them in, that's a pretty useful thing. You can set up catalogs. I don't think I have on this. And of course I can access the browser. I can go through, find the desktop. I can go to the documents folder. If I go to the user downloads, I should be able to find my worksheet media folder. The workspace browser allows you to tag objects. So obviously it's not in here, but in my my effects list, I might have things like this one here could be tagged footsteps. So I just create a tag. I think I right click tags. So some people use feet, footstep, and this is just so you can sort by tags. And that's going in there as well. I can say chair, so that might be tagging chair. It means I can search by that, and I could say creaks, because maybe I want to use a chair creak for something else. Yep, you get the idea. Doors, and so forth. So these are all different things that I can do. And of course I can listen to them. There we go, there's a button click. Yeah, you can see we've got our feet. Props. Some headphones and some glasses. So, I can go and audition these things. Obviously, if I wanted to find a particular bit of DX.
Had a thought. Could you leave and the word gap?
Yep, so I can go and audition these things. I can check out duration, a whole lot of different aspects about it. What sort of file it is, what the sample rate is. But if I've mapped the tempos of anything that goes in there, where it actually exists, the unique ID, clip names, all of that sort of stuff. So these are all searchable things, and I can look and sort by chairs, and only my chair creak comes out. So this is where tags come in useful. Anyway, that's something you can look at. I'm actually going to sort by name and then grab the effects, and I want a new track for every one of them. So straight into there, bam. There's my effects. Command click on the music, so I've only got the effects chosen, and I'm going to put them down here. I actually think I did it wrong. I actually think I took these from the downloads folder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete these tracks. So highlight, delete the tracks, delete. The clips are actually still here. This is where I've got to be careful. So I'm going to select all my effects tracks, and I'm going to go up here. It's a bit of a mission to get rid of files, and you want it to be, because you don't want to accidentally delete things. So I'm going to go up to there's a little menu for the clip list options, and I'm going to go clear, and it's all of these selected ones, and I'm going to remove them from the session so it's not looking for them anymore. And now I'll go back to my workspace browser. Let's go. And what I forgot to do when I dragged it in is holding the option key. So there you go. Now it's copied them into the audio files folder, and we can see that by going up to our session audio files, and there's the effects in there. Or we can also check it by going to the Finder, and now we should see all of the files are in our session folder. Just be careful about this. There are ways to bring everything together, to collect items. So that's something that's worthwhile thinking about, and I'll show you that in another video. So now we've got everything in there. It's not mixed.
Mind the gap. Mind the gap.
Hello, Stephen, could you do a quicker one?
Mind the gap.
Hello again. How about a funky one?
What does that even mean? Who the f are you anyway?
Sorry, Stephen. Let me introduce Mayor of London, Boris Johnson.
Cool. All right, so we've got, all the little bits and pieces in there. You can have a look and play around with it, cut things up, change them, re-record your own things, have a bit of a practice around with it. The last little thing it talks about in the worksheet is the main windows, and we're going to explore them properly next time, but let's just have a look. We've got the edit window, obviously, which has all of the clips that we can see, and we can change to some different views. We'll go through the tools in the next one. We're using command equals to change between the mix and edit window. That's a really important thing. So whichever one's up, the other one becomes command equals. So it toggles between those two. And actually command and equals, or the equals key, gets used for opening and closing all sorts of other things. So it's useful to get used to that workflow. Just as a basic look at what we are dealing with, like the names of things. In the edit window, we've got the toolbar, which has got all these tools up the top. We've got the track list at the side. This can be hidden if you want to get rid of the track list. You see that little arrow pointing in? That can show or hide the list of tracks. By the way, you can do anything that I did by clicking on a name. So see, I right click a name there to get that menu up. I can right click it there. I can show or hide different tracks. Click through, you see they're disappearing. They're not actually disappeared. They've just been hidden. I want to move my master fader down to the bottom. Some people like it at the top. Up to you. Yeah, so this is the track list, this is the group list, this is the clip list where the clips themselves are. I mean, you can keep putting them in if you want. Drag and drop, they're just copies of the files that exist. Files and clips like this, if you want to get rid of them, just delete. Doesn't delete them from the clip list, just deletes them off the timeline, so you won't hear them when you play across that timeline. That clip list again can be hidden. So it's that key, that little arrow key to hide. The next section down, we've got the universe window. This is a bit of a mysterious one. I'm going to zoom in quite a lot, and you see what it's doing is it's saying that this is the bit of window that I can see. So that's the screen. That's what I'm seeing. So it can be a good way to navigate around to a different part of the session. You can actually make it quite big if you want to see, if you've got lots of tracks. Yeah, at the moment this is all dead space because it's only got a few tracks, so I don't need to make it that big. You can also just click on it to bring the window to a certain space. It's just drag and pick up and drag, move around. So it's kind of useful. Below the universe window, we've got the rulers. So this is where we can say, hey, I want to make sure that my session is in timecode. My main counter's in SMPTE timecode, and then my grid will also be in single frame, so that I can move things around. I can nudge frame by frame, and if you watch the video as I nudge through frame by frame, you will find slowly moves, just Boris waving frame by frame. So that makes things good for setting up. That's where we'll leave it today. The next video will be all about worksheet 2. I'm going to save, which is Command S, and close my session.